Hey class. Digital Nation, what I thought one of the top points that I find myself doing all the time, multitasking, the distractions, even though I'm not in that digital age, I find I have found myself getting there more and more. What I found fascinating in a couple things that were talked about in the documentary was how it's not as effective, but people who do multitask think it's so effective. What was funny is the study that they did and conducted, how it really translated to we think we're so good at the multitasking, but really in essence we weren't as effective. I thought that was really interesting, and it made me stop and think. Kind of what one of uh, the authors of the documentary was talking about with pause and stop and kind of take a look around at what's happening. I'm really bad at doing that. Even when I was watching the documentary, I found myself checking emails and writing notes and then doodling. Um, I guess I didn't realize how much it's become a part of our lives and a part of our process. I really thought, from that standpoint, that was something from the documentary that even though um, it's not something new, I found it very interesting, especially the studies that they are starting to do and studying the brain and how different the brain was from reading to Googling. And so, Google, the other thing I found is that your brain on Google is actually not so much a great thing. So that was very interesting to me too. Um, you know, I keep talking about how interesting it was, but I think at the end of the day, this is where we're at. I also raise a 16-year-old and I have a 25 and a 24-year-old too. And so the different generations, I can certainly see my 16-year-old, he is much better to communicate with in text messaging. That's not a cop out. That's not a way that we shouldn't be communicating. I just think it's just normal for them. I mean, we have conversations around the dinner table all the time, but I just know when there's different messages, he's easier to communicate with through text messaging. So I think there's something to be said about the digital nation and how much the technology it's consuming. The other part that I did find interesting as well was the fact that they were talking about the research can't keep up with the technology, and that is the truth. I work in a software company myself, and I know that constantly technology just evolves. I mean, we're on an iPhone 7 and an iPhone 10 is already out, and I'm going to upgrade to the 10 and there's 30 working on 12 or 13 or 14, right? So you really can't keep up. So it's going to be interesting to see the research that does come out of this, especially, with the generations that know nothing without digital, and what that really impact it really does have across the board. Um, so, I think how, this will, affect my life directly or indirectly. I think it's made me take notice. So again, like I said, when I was even doing this assignment, I was multitasking a little bit. So I shamefully admit that, but it's the truth. And I think I do need to slow down sometimes. I feel like I need to um, help with my memory, especially the older we get. That just stop and not only just pause with it, but really force yourself to remember things without a list or remember things without um, constant reminders. Because I think it's just better for us to go back to some of the basics of just memory form and to keep that memory in place. Um, I think at the end of the day, how I feel about this effect is it's interesting that we think we're more effective on multitasking and being distracted. I think it's become a curse a little bit because we're constantly on. So I know that there's other countries like France. It's against the law to even send emails over the weekend. I can't even imagine if that happened over here because we're always so plugged in. So I think the effect is how do we ever unplug, and that's going to be the biggest question. At the start off the documentary, when they were talking about a 2 week vacation and you knew nothing that was going on in that 2 weeks, we know everything that happens in the two hours. So that's my review on the documentary.